What if I told you that making your first comic is easier than you think it is? What if I also told you you don't need a drawing tablet, you don't need to pay for software, or have the most unique story idea in the world, you don't even need to know how to draw to make your first comic? Yes, you can still make comics even if you don't know how to draw, and by the end of this video, I won't just prove it to you, but I'll also show you how. And this is coming from someone who's made his first comic, rebooted that same comic, and even self-published it. What I'm not going to do is tell you to just hire a comic artist, because you probably don't have the money for that right now as a beginner. I'm also not going to tell you to just spend years drawing every day until you're ready, bro. No, no, no. I want you to start working on your comic today, not after 20 years of waiting for your art to get perfect.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Now, I can already hear all the questions that are going through your mind right now. Like, where do I even start making my comic? What tools should I use to make my comic? What do I do if I can't draw? Why can't they just release the Epstein files? Wait, how did that sneak into the script? Let's start with the most important question here, because if you don't answer this, then everything else falls apart. And that's, where do you start when making your first comic? I can tell you where you definitely don't start, and that's by drawing. Yes, my first piece of advice in a video about making your first comic is not to draw your first comic yet. When I first started making comics, I used to get this rush of excitement every time I had a new idea. I'd grab my sketchbook, draw the first couple of pages, and then nothing. The story would fizzle out because I didn't know where it was going or why I even started it in the first place. And now I have a whole folder of half-finished comics. Comics that had potential, but I could never finish them. And then it hit me that if I didn't stop this cycle, I would never be able to realize my dream of drawing grown men in tight clothes and big muscles wrestling each other on paper. I could have phrased that a bit better. If you don't get the basics right that I'm about to show you, your comic will probably end up like most of my early projects. 2 or 3 pages in and then abandoned forever. That's why, if you're making your first comic, you don't start with drawing. You start with outlining, aka your plan. The entire comic depends on this first move, and if you mess this up, it'll all be for nothing. Now, I know outlining might sound really complicated, but it's actually way easier than you think. You're not writing a giant novel or building a 100-page document. In fact, you only need 1 page to outline. And since I know you guys love the chart in that power system video I made last year, I made another chart to help you with outlining your comic in 4 easy steps. The first part of the outline is one of the most important, and that's the pitch Bible. The pitch Bible is basically your 1-page pitch of your comic story. And for that, you're gonna have to answer these 5 questions. With the first one being, what's the genre of your comic? A story's genre is basically the category the story is in. Different genres have different vibes. When most people think of comics, they only think of the superhero genre because of Marvel and DC. And superheroes are not the only genre of comics you can make. There's comedy, there's slice of life, there's action, there's sci-fi, there's fantasy, there's romance. The main thing with genres is you want to include some of the popular tropes that appeal to the fans of that genre. A trope is something that usually happens a lot in stories again and again. For example, if you make a superhero comic, but no one has cool costumes, no one has powers or advanced tech or armor or something, and it's just regular people fighting, it won't appeal to most superhero readers. It could still be a good story, but it wouldn't be in the right genre. That's like a comedy with no jokes, or a Diddy party with no baby oil. Most beginners think if it's been done before, then you should avoid doing it. And that's just wrong. Tropes aren't a bad thing, and they can actually help your story as long as you put a unique spin on them. They help your story feel familiar to your audience, because when people finish one story, they usually look for something similar to it because of how it made them feel. Basically, be unique, but don't be too unique. A personal example would be my webcomic Project 10, and it's appealed to people who love the superhero genre because they like the tropes in the comic. They like super suits, check. They like superpowers, check. And they've seen similar characters like Spider-Man and Blue Beetle. It feels both familiar and different and new. So the trope of a humanoid bug-like superhero has helped attract some readers. And also, for some reason, Kamen Rider fans who keep showing love to the comic, I did not see that coming, by the way. Thank you guys. You can stick to one genre strictly, or you can mix it up. For example, you can take the comedy genre and mix it with the superhero genre, and then you can create a superhero comedy. That's kind of like the Harley Quinn show.
Whoa, what'd that do?
I don't know.
Oh no, Carl! I'm so sorry. It's a cancer ray!
Harley Quinn, you gave me cancer?
Why would they even make this?
But just because a story is in one main genre doesn't mean it can't have elements of another genre. For example, Invincible is mostly a superhero series, but it still has some romance sprinkled in, especially between Mark and Eve. Or Saga, which is mainly a space-based comic, but it also has I don't know what to call this. Saga has a lot. Number 2, who are your characters? Characters are the most important part of your story because that's actually who's driving it. As long as you have good writing, you can make any character interesting. Even Kite Man. Hell yeah. Yes, Kite Man is a real character, and yes, he's my goat. There's so many different types of characters and archetypes to choose from. There's the mentor, the rebel, the lover, the leader, the sage, blah 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 blah. Basically, there's a lot of character types. But this is your first comic, and we're keeping it simple and easy. I only want you to focus on 2 character types: the protagonist and antagonist, aka the hero and the villain. These are the most important characters in any story, and for your first comic, that's just gonna be your only focus. So who is the hero of your story and who is their villain? That's all you need for now. You don't need those crazy long character building checklists online with 5,000 plus questions that ask you to mention your character's zodiac sign, their blood type, or their thoughts on the political and economic state of the world right now. I personally really hate those lists, and I find that they overcomplicate the character creation process for nothing in the beginning. I simplified it down to the 3 most important ones. Who are they? What do they want? Why do they want it? That's your character. A good example would be Superman. Who is he? He's a baby from another planet who was sent to Earth. What does he want? To protect the people of Earth. And why does he want it? Because he's a punk rocker. Okay, jokes aside, it's because his parents raised him to be kind. Lex Luthor. Who is he? Lex Luthor is a smart rich guy who needs to take a trip to Turkey. What does he want? He wants to get rid of Superman and be the most powerful person in the world. Hashtag Super. And why does he want this? Because he hates that people admire Superman more than him. AKA he's jealous.
My envy is a calling. It is the sole hope for humanity because it is what has driven me to annihilating you. What a...
In my own comic, the hero is Project N, the B guy on this poster you can see, and he has to fight the villain Poacher X, the guy in this very obviously evil armor. The hero versus villain conflict is usually the heart of any story ever told, even in non-superhero stories. The antagonist doesn't have to be some alien with infinity stones trying to wipe out half the universe. It could also just be the evil stepmother, like in Cinderella, or a crazy teacher who's obsessed with finally proving the existence of. As long as they're making the protagonist's life hell, you're good to go. Only make side characters after you've made these 2. And you can use the same process for the rest of the cast, but keep the first cast small, because it's your first comic. Now, designing your characters and making them look good, that's a whole other video on its own. So make sure you hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because I will be dropping a full video on character design soon. Number 3, what's the setting of your comic? AKA, when and where does your story take place? This one's pretty simple, so I made this diagram over here that you can pause and take a screenshot of. Let's start with when, which is basically you choosing the time period your comic is going to take place in. When could be in the past, like the 300 comic. Remember that movie where that guy is like, "This is Sparta"? Yeah, that was a comic first. Modern day could be like most superhero stories. This time period is a bit easier to write because you don't really have to do much research for it. For example, Peter Parker's Spider-Man mostly happens in our modern time. And the future as a setting would be like basically Spider-Man 2099, aka Miguel.
¡Ay, Miguel! ¡Miguel!
The where can be our regular world, or it could be an alternate version of our world, or even not our world but something completely different. So an example of our regular world would be those based on a true story movies, like those propaganda war movies, where it's basically our world and the countries are the same and the history is the same. An alternate world is like a superhero story where it's our world but there's a guy who swings in the sky fighting a guy with tentacles on his back, or a rich guy who dresses up as a bat and beats up henchmen who are just trying to feed their families. An imaginary world is nothing like ours. There's no relation to ours at all. Like different continents, different history, different culture. Kind of like the world in Avatar: The Last Airbender, Arrakis in Dune, or even Game of Thrones. These kinds of worlds, they'll give you more freedom to mess around with because you're only limited by your imagination. You mix the when and the where together and boom, you'll get your different setting. For example, a story set in modern day times, that's the when, but it's in an alternate world where there was a zombie apocalypse, that's the where, and this is basically The Walking Dead. Project N is a story where it's set in an alternate world in modern times, and it's an alternate version of Nairobi, the city I live in, with most things being pretty similar to ours, except this version of Nairobi has a giant dome over it, and it's controlled by an evil corporation. A lot of authors tend to do the whole alternate version of where they live thing because it makes it easier to write the setting since they understand it better. Solo Leveling takes place in Korea because the creators are Korean. One Punch Man is in Japan because the creators are from Japan. Harry Potter is British because the author was. Marvel heroes are always saving the world, but usually they're just saving New York. Because Marvel started in New York. My comic, again, is in an alternate Nairobi city because I was born and grew up in Kenya, and Nairobi is the capital. So, yeah, you can try your hometown for a setting, but then spice it up. 4. What's your logline? The logline is your one-sentence pitch for your comic. So, when people ask what it's about, you don't start spiraling into every detail of your plot. Now, condensing your entire story into one sentence sounds hard, but it's actually pretty easy. Just use this simple formula for your logline. Protagonists plus inciting incident plus protagonist goal plus conflict. Protagonist is your hero, and you've already done that. And the protagonist goal, we've also done that. The only two things left are the inciting incident, which is a fancy way of saying what started the story, and then the conflict, which is basically who or what is actually stopping the hero from getting what they want. A quick example would be Batman. As the protagonist, he's the son of the billionaire couple, the Waynes. The inciting incident is him watching his parents get gunned down in an alley. The goal is he decides to become the protector of the city and stop crime. And then the conflict, what's stopping him is the city's villain make this hard for him. For my story, Project N, the protagonist is an architect who's living in a dome city. The inciting incident is him discovering he has superhuman bee powers. The goal is to take down the company that ruined his life, and then the conflict is that the company controls the dome city and it's using all its power and money to kill him. Boom! Just like that, you have your story's logline in one sentence. 5. How does your story end? What are you building towards? What's the final conflict? Think about this because endings can usually make or break a good story. Have you ever started a series or franchise that just started out really good in the beginning and then they lost the plot in the end? That's because a lot of writers don't plan the ending well and they kind of just, keep guessing. So you can avoid this problem by deciding how your comic is going to end before you even start it. That's actually very important. Amazing, you've done your pitch bible, but before we can get to the tools and software that you can use and get the answer to the big question, what do you do if you can't draw? We still need to finish the last 3 steps in this chart. In fact, this next part on the chart could change everything in your comic, yet a lot of people skip it. A big problem people have when it comes to making their comics is usually their ideas. You either have way too many ideas or the opposite, where you have close to 0 ideas and your river of creativity is drier than your phone notifications when you wake up in the... Hello? What do you mean I can't keep roasting the viewer? But I never meant... Okay, fine. Just let me say one last thing to them. Okay. Your ex won't text you back. You need to move on. Basically, the solution to both these problems, your ideas, can be fixed by this one simple thing on the chart, the story circle. The story circle is basically the plot structure of your comic. What even is plot structure? Plot is just the sequence of events in your story. How to arrange those crazy scene ideas you come up with while you pace back and forth in your room, listening to TikTok audios with your earpods in, pretending you're the main character that's soloing the bad guys. You know you do that. Don't even lie. Why do you need a plot structure? So that your story actually makes sense to people reading it. Look, there's a lot of plot structures out there, like the 15 beat sheet, 3-act structure, 5-act structure, hero's journey. But in my experience, the easiest one to learn as a beginner is probably the Dan Harmon story circle. That's the guy that made Rick and Morty. It's easier than other story structures out there because 1, it's simple. 2, it's visual. The circle shape makes it easy to remember where you are in the story. 3, it works for anything, comedy, drama, action. 4, it's character focused. It's built around the main character's change, not just plot points. And 5, it's flexible. Let me show you the story circle in action using Spider-Man as an example. You, the normal world. Peter Parker is an ordinary high school student in New York. He's nerdy, he's shy, he gets bullied. He lives with Aunt May and Uncle Ben. That's his regular life. Need. Something's missing. Peter wants to be respected, noticed, and make something of himself. He dreams of being more than the nerd that no one cares about. Go. Cross the threshold. Peter's life changes when he's bitten by a radioactive spider. He gains superpowers, strength, agility, wall crawling. You know the powers. Search. Fun and games. He experiments with his powers. He tries wrestling for money and shows off. He thinks being Spider-Man is just for fun and it's mostly for personal gain. Find. He gets what he wants. Peter gets fame, attention, money from his powers, but then he ignores a criminal who runs past him.
I missed the part where that's my problem.
Take the price. That criminal kills Uncle Ben, and he realizes his selfishness led to tragedy. Return, back to the old world. He returns home without Uncle Ben. His life is changed forever. The fun is gone and the responsibility remains. 8. Change, the new normal. Peter becomes Spider-Man for real, using his powers to protect others' lives. And, after learning Uncle Ben's lesson, with great power comes great responsibility. So this is how you can do it for your comic. That first part is you. Show the main character living their normal life. 2. Need. Something is missing or wrong. They want something. This is that goal part. 3. Go. They leave their normal life and try to get it. This is when they start, actually decide to go after their goal. Then 4. Search. They face problems, they try things, and they learn new stuff. This is where that's the kind of things that, you'll find training montages, action scenes, blah, blah, blah. 5. Find. They get what they're looking for, or they think they do. 6. Take. It costs them something, or it has a downside. Yeah, they get the thing they wanted, but it costs them something. 7. Return. They go back to their old world. And then 8. Change. How different are they because of what happened to them through the story? What they lost, what they gained. That's literally all you need to plot out your comic. So how long should your first comic be? Most professional comics like Marvel and DC are usually 22 to 24 pages per issue, making them around 132 to 144 pages per volume and 1,000 plus pages for the big omnibus collections. I mean, look at this thing. That's a chunky boy.
I think Moto likes you. Here he comes.
So instead of making 1,000 plus pages and planning hundreds of issues, we're just gonna start with a simple 8 to 10 page comic book called a one-shot. It's basically a mini story version of your comic. Think of it like a demo. We're doing a short comic because you want to keep it simple and actually finish it, instead of starting 2 pages and then procrastinating by watching YouTube videos on how to make comics on YouTube instead of actually making your comic. Yeah, this is me calling you out. Each point in the story circle will be 1 page maximum of your one shot. So that means your first comic is gonna be 8 pages total. You can add 2 more, but that's pushing it just to make it 10, but we're gonna keep it to 8. Your one shot could end up becoming something that you come back to in the future and rework, like I did with my first one shot, which was B-Man, which I made when I was 11, and today it's now I Am Project 10. It's the free web comic that you can go and read right now on our website. You have your pitch bible, you have your story structure. Now you can finally pick up a pencil because we're about to get into storyboarding. I once spent an entire afternoon drawing a comic page, only to find the panels were crammed, the pacing was off, and the story was hard to follow. I had to throw it all out and then start over. So how do you not end up wasting all that time like I did? The solution is to make thumbnails, quick, small, practical sketches of your pages, and then that'll let you test out the layout, fix mistakes, and make sure the story flows before you even start the real drawing. So how do you do this? I want you to grab a piece of paper or open a new document if you're drawing digitally. Draw 8 to 10 vertical rectangles to represent your pages. Inside each rectangle, sketch your panels using stick figures or simplified shapes of your characters and the objects that will be in that scene. And then focus on panel order and story flow, not perfect art. So, for example, page 1 should be the you part of the story circle. Page 2 is the need part of your story circle. Go is until, you get the point. Page 3 is go until you get to the last point. Each page thumbnail should only take you about 5 minutes, and make sure to use a timer, please, so that finishing all your thumbnails will take you less than 1 hour or less. Keep it to 5 panels or less per page. Panels are those boxes. Do not go beyond 5. It's just gonna start getting crammed, and we're trying to keep it simple in the beginning. So remember, keep it very rough. Just use the plot points in your story circle for each page. And the last thing is always factor in your speech bubbles when you're thumbnailing your story. That way you don't lack space for the words that will actually help turn your comic from just a bunch of pictures into a story. So a lot of beginner comic artists skip this, and this causes a lot of problems. It makes finishing your comic so much easier. I call it panel prepping, and basically instead of just thumbnailing your whole comic and then starting to draw, you go into the actual pages and then you draw out all the panels first. No art, just the boxes. You do that for the whole issue from beginning to end before you start drawing. It's kind of like meal prepping or setting out your gym clothes the night before. When you see a whole issue filled with empty panels, your brain is just going to have this itch to just finish them. It's going to take away one of the biggest excuses to procrastinate, which is, starting. So this one's more of a productivity tip, but it has helped a lot. So now we have the perfect outline and plan that's come together, but there's still 2 big unanswered questions though. What tools tools should you use to make your comic, and what do you do if you can't draw? If we don't answer that, then we will never be able to cross the finish line in this roadmap and make your first comic. So let's start with the second biggest question, which is about the tools you should use. Now, there's a lot of different tools you can use to make your comic, but I'll be focusing on what I used specifically when I started out. These days, I work on an expensive digital tablet, a Huion, with Photoshop and Clip Studio Paint. But I didn't start there. Before I could afford any of that, I made my comics for relatively cheap, even self-published one, and sold it at the Movie Jabba Expo, which is like this big Comic Con we have here in Kenya. And yes, the first comic I ever self-published and sold was made without a tablet, without Photoshop, and with a budget that was basically lunch money. So here's how you can do the same. Step 1, draw your comic on paper. The tools you'll need is a plain paper, A4 printing paper was what I used, and then pencil, any kind of pencil, HB, 2B, eraser, black gel pen for inking, and then maybe whiteout, but I didn't really use whiteout, but you can get it if you want. But those are the main things you'll need. And here's how to do it. You're gonna work in 2 stages. First of all, pencils. Here you're just gonna draw your comic the way you planned it in the thumbnailing and storyboarding stage. Except with pencils, you actually have the option to erase when anything goes wrong. And then the inks. Now, once you've realized and erased a couple of times and you're like, okay, now I think the art looks good, you're going to draw over it using the inking pen. That's the gel pen that you're gonna use. This locks in your final art and then makes it easier for you to scan and then just improve the quality of the art. Step 2, you're gonna scan your drawing with your phone. You do not need a fancy, expensive scanner/printer. So tools you'll need: your smartphone, a scanner app, and Google Drive. So this is how to do it. Open your scanner app. The one I used to use was Cam Scanner. It's not sponsored. You can use any, to be honest. I really don't care about them specifically. I just use them because, they worked. The app will automatically sharpen and brighten your lines so that they're clean. Save your scanned pages and then upload them to Google Drive so you can download them later on your laptop or desktop for the next stage, which is step 3, color or don't. So the tools you'll need, the digital option is a laptop or a desktop, and Krita, which is a free digital art program. If you're not using a digital option, you can just, color in using colored pencils and markers and something. So how to do it? If you have a computer, open your scanned pages in Krita. First, you're gonna have to go to krita.org, download Krita. It's completely free. And then color digitally. I even used Microsoft Paint for a while because, the software doesn't really matter, but yeah, you can just use Krita. If you don't have a computer, again, you can color directly on the paper with pencils or markers and then scan the artwork. Many famous comics like The Walking Dead or even most manga are in black and white. Actually, I know another Kenyan comic artist. His name is Tony MK, and he's someone who I've been giving tips and just kind of mentoring when it comes to making comics. And recently, he just finished his own comic one-shot, and it was all in black and white. The only thing he colored in was the cover. So again, the choice is yours. Color isn't a must, but you can go for it. Step 4, printing your comic. Now, the tools you'll need here is a PDF of your comic and either a local print shop or your own printer. If you're gonna have your own printer, then you're gonna also need some staples and lots of A4 paper. So here's how to do it with the professional printing route. You're going to Google printing services or print shops near me on Google Maps or Facebook. So just after you find one, go through a couple, write them down, and then just start calling them and emailing them. Send them your PDF and then ask them how much it'll cost for you to print it. Once you guys agree on a price, they'll print it out for you. And if they don't do comics, just ask for magazines instead, because single issue comics are very similar. So that's what I used for the self-published version of my comic in 2021. I will mention this is more expensive though. So you're gonna have to pay for them to do it for you. They won't do it for free. Now, home printing, which is what I did in high school, was I printed my first comic like on a regular office printer. I folded A4 pages in half like this, and then each sheet became 4 comic pages, front, back, and then I stapled them together. I stapled myself a couple of times. This method might have screamed a bit, but it's okay. They were manly screams. Now, it wasn't as polished as professional printing, but it was cheap, it was easy, it was beginner friendly. I even made so many copies that I started giving them away for free at school till the comic got banned because students were reading it in class, but that's a whole other story. You could also not print it. You could literally just, release it as a digital web comic or something online. That's way cheaper, I'm not even gonna lie to you. And you can still use Clip Studio Paint, Procreate, Photoshop, and any other apps and tools. I'm mostly explaining what I used to do, especially when I was a beginner. But again, there's different ways and tools you can do it. That's just the method I used. And now for the final big question, the one I get asked the most when it comes to making comics. What do you do if you can't draw? If you can't draw and you want to make your comic, your three main options are this. 1. Hire an artist, which is a bit expensive. 2. Wait until your art is good enough after years of perfectionism, which will take way too long. And the third and final option is the one you can do today, and it's free. But let me explain how this method works. So back in 2009, there was an unknown creator that started posting a webcomic on his personal website. And the drawings were rough, the lines were shaky, and the style was far from professional. But the story was sharp, it was funny, and it was full of personality. And somehow people connected with it. And before long, millions were reading it. Eventually, a well-known artist reached out to him, offering to redraw the entire series, which brought in an even bigger audience. But here's the twist. Many fans still go back to the original badly drawn version. And that scrappy little comic was One Punch Man, and the creator was One. Today, you obviously know One Punch Man is a global hit with an anime, merch, millions of fans, and it's all started because One drew his comic anyway. Even without top tier art, if he'd waited to be ready, it wouldn't exist. Starting mattered more than perfect art, and that made all the difference. And here's the crazy part about this. Many fans still prefer this rough original version of the webcomic. Just spend any time around the fandom online, the One Punch Man fandom. They literally prefer the webcomic to the manga, the professionally drawn manga art. And that's the same with another webcomic called Order of the Stick. It literally started as stick figures with swords. And today, it has a dedicated fan base and a Kickstarter that's raised millions of dollars. Like, readers connected with it despite, or maybe even because of its simple art. So, what's the answer? How do you make your comic if you can't draw and you can't afford an artist? What's the third method? Draw it anyway. Like, I'm serious. Even if you think your art is bad, someone out there will find charm in it. In a world that's drowning in AI-generated images, human-made art, even if it's not perfect, stands out more than ever. I used to think that if I just improved my art enough, everyone would love my work. But in my last video about making my comic, I showed you guys that I still get comments from people telling me that my art is bad, that I should basically quit or get someone else to draw my stuff. And this is after years of improvement. So if you can afford to hire an artist right now, you go do that. But if you can't, stop waiting for the perfect day when your art is finally good enough to make your comic. That day will never come. If you really can't draw, just pick a simple art style. Stick figures are fine. Just draw anyway. You might have somebody who resonates with your comic either way. Like, you might make enough to hire an artist later, or you might get better over time and reboot it yourself, just like I did with my original B-Man one-shot, which is way more polished now, but only exists because I made that first rough version. And even if you never build a huge audience, or you don't even want to, you'll still have something priceless. A cool homemade comic that you can share with the people you care about. Start today before you go to bed tonight. Like, you could at least write your pitch Bible. When I started, I didn't have any crazy art skills. I had a pencil, a piece of paper, and passion. And most importantly, I had a story to tell, and so do you. So go make that comic.